So Tahira, let's talk about joy.
Let's talk about our KPIs, Joy. What if our KPI was joy and
Wouldn't that
not
be magical?
random numbers of things that are hard for people to achieve?
Hmm.
Joy is hard to achieve.
Totally.
In fact, it's impossible to achieve joy if you haven't known a whole bunch of other emotions along the way, but I think it's possible to know joy.
But honestly, I mean, when they say, oh, the top 4 or 5 reasons people go to events, it's like networking and education and da 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 da. I think the number one is joy.
I think the number one is joy, too, actually. And I think that it has been joy since the beginning of time. So that is actually one of the things that I look at in the book is, it's historical context of, at the end of 2019, I was in Turkey. And so we had been for a site executive summit when I was still working with site. And then I stayed, and my cousin, who's half Turkish, came over and we did some traveling and we went to Ephesus. And Ephesus is a city that existed, depends on the numbers that you look at, but from about the 5th century BC through to somewhere between 260 to 320 AD. So more than 2,000 years ago. And you walk down, you come in, there's a pile of rubble, and they explain that that's where like the boys' school and men's training ground was. And then you turn and you start walking down these marble roads. So all the roads were made out of marble. And you go past where the hospital was with the Hippocrates serpents carved into the side. You go past what was like a small temple. You go like a public toilet where it's like literally rows of carved in marble toilet seats that are over an aqueduct. And then you walk to the end of this road, and there's what was the facade of the library that's 200 feet, like 50 feet, like soaring in the air. It's incredible,
Yeah.
all carved out of marble. Turn down the next way, start walking down, and there's a 25,000 seat stadium carved out of marble that they're restoring and doing concerts in again.
That's
And so
amazing.
as we're sitting at home and the world's shutting down, I was like, that's a whole city that shut down that's being restored and reused. And guess what? More than 2,000 years ago, people wanted to meet. They wanted
Yep.
to meet for sport, they wanted to be entertained, they wanted theater, they wanted to get together and celebrate, and we're going to do that again. So it was literally the thing that gave me the most hope during COVID. So it's we're human. We've always wanted to connect.
Well, it's that emotional connection. Like I always think of IMAX as the hugging fest ever. Like if anybody should be measuring it's, anything. It's not leads or it's not how many business cards or scans that you got. It's actually how many hugs and high fives that you've got. And that hug factor, which is, related to the emotion evoked, which is joy, is 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 key and it's critical when designing any intentional design, as you say, because you are the
Yes.
fairy godmother with that term. Nobody else can take it, trademark it. But that aside, i think I think people want to evoke joy in their events. Do you think it's people to shy away from it sometimes, using it like even
I
with
think
their
they
marketing
just
copy because of not being able to measure it?
100%. So, and it is hard to measure. I'm gonna just back up to, I'm teaching again, which is crazy, but I'm teaching an online class now with BCIT, which is event strategy and design. And they redesigned the program because they're just, they saw that there was a gap of people going into market and not really understanding that it is actually a business. It's not, events are a business. They need a strategy and they need to be well designed. And then called and said, like, please come and teach it, which I taught there for 20 years. And so, of course, well, I didn't really want to say yes at first, but then I said yes. And now it's really fun again. So I'm just like, oh, this is why I love teaching. I've put 1,000 students out into the world already. Some of them have stayed in events. About one of the students in the first class said, Basically, I don't understand why you call it intentional event design. It seems kind of dumb to me. Like literally she said that. Because aren't all events intentionally designed? So why can't you just say event design? And I was just like, in my head, I was just like, it's not dumb. But my outside voice said, well, you know, like, I'm just gonna pause and think about that for a minute because no, I've been to many events. I have planned many events, but participated in a lot more than I've planned or produced. And no, they're not. Most events are not done with a lot of intentional design. Most events are done because they've always done them. And a few events, the ones that we read about, are the ones that use intentional event design. But if we're reading about the same 20 events over and over again, and 8 million events are produced every year in the US and every year in the UK and every year, in India and every year in,
Right.
so no, they're not. And if you're not intentionally designing the customer journey right from the very first time that somebody finds you on social or enters your website, all the way, through to they arrive at the airport, they arrive at the hotel, they arrive at the venue,
Mhm.
they walk through your experience, and they have to have peak end moments. They have to have highs and lows. They have to have, all of those things because two people attend every event.
Mhm.
I had written about this before, and then it was actually really clarified for me with there's a woman named Agatha Sostek who wrote a book called The Umami Strategy, where she really breaks it down into the experiencing self and the remembering self.
Mhm.
And that's who shows up, right? So we walk in and we go through that whole experience. And IMEX is the perfect example. I've been to, I think, 18 now. And it's a marathon and it's a minute. It's a month,
Yeah.
it's a moment. It's all of those things, right? So it's 4 days it's a compressed amount of time. In any event, the remembering self is going to remember teeny tiny seconds or moments, micro memories to big memories. And what you're mostly gonna remember is a feeling of, "Do I want to come back to that event?"
Yes.
I wanted to come back so much that I just kept waiting to be able to work there. And, I also Uber van, for the obvious reasons that it is because you get there and it's all of those moments of joy. You don't mind waiting in the big line because in that big line you're going to probably see five people that you know. When you get on the floor, it's going to just be an endless stream of good conversations and good business conversations
True.
and good hugs, and sometimes those combine. And even when they don't combine, you're still making really good use of your time and having those hallway moments. And then, oh, I'm kind of tired. Oh, maybe I can go do some somatic breathing. Maybe I can sit here. Oh my gosh, I needed an email. Oh, look, I can go and, hang out in this work lounge and finish this email and then go to my next meeting. And it's building in all of those little moments that make an ease of the event
Mhm.
intentionally designed so
There you go.
that when you get into the business part of the event, you can be at your best self
Yeah.
when you're doing a fairly intense event. And so that is designed. And it's really important to do that. Absolutely.
I I think so too. I think, I think it's not only important, I think people seek it as you when you think of this is how I'm going to feel before you even go to an event, that heightened sense of, okay, now I know for sure I'm going. Because here's the other thing that really happens is it's almost like a dopamine fix, and it's the time of year. And that time of year of whenever that event is that's going to bring you joy, you sort of keep going back and forth. Should I go? Should I not? But that joy factor and that dopamine fix, it pushes you over the edge where you say, screw it. I'm buying that ticket. And that's where people are like, oh, you didn't register yet? No, because you are like processing where you what you want to feel.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it does hit you. Like I think more than ever right now, it people are just trying to figure out what brings them joy. And I don't mean to sound like Marie Kondo or anything like that, but it's kind of true, but it's also on the work side. So if you think of, you know, joy as a KPI, there has to be some sort of way where people are thinking of it's almost like a personal emotion or personal aspect and how it intertwines with your professional. And you and I
Well,
have always said, work where it does bring you joy, because if you don't, then something is off on your KPIs and it's going to det- you're going to take a detour of some kind.
absolutely. And I think it's, so the rest of the title of our KPI is joy is how live events catalyze happiness, productivity, and trust.
Perfect.
So there's a ton of personal stories in this book, ton. Because guess what? We're all humans and we all show up at every event as humans. So, we're going to show up, you know, I, s- I have a tiny little moment about this in the book, but it's when I started writing the book, it was 2023. And then we
Yeah.
get through, we do the show. So I'm not writing a lot then because it's really kind of one of my first shows. I'm really focused on getting that right. And then on Nov at the beginning of November that year, we lost a really, really good friend. And it was both sudden and not sudden. It was a terminal illness with a sudden ending. And then there was so many people lost over the next 10 months that I didn't write at all. And because it's very hard to write about joy when you're living in grief, and as we got towards a year later, I started writing again. And a lot of that was, because we were able to process some of that, and then at the show last year, you and Johnny Earl did a session on navigating grief because you've had a long grief journey. And when you're living in a long grief journey, which many people are, whether it is because you're living with somebody with an illness, which is living with a third person in your relationship,
Hmm.
when you are living with troublesome work, when you are living with teenagers, when you are, there's a lot of moments of time that can be very challenging in life. And so having things to look forward to, whether it's your favorite concert, seeing your favorite sport team, going to an event that you have anticipation for, going on vacation, which you have anticipation for,
Yeah,
there's we need to be able to have things to look forward to as humans, and we also need to have things that give us respite from some of that heaviness that we might be living with.
definitely. 100%. I would say that going to the events and seeing my loved ones and just those hugs got me through the 15 years of grief, and it was just it was more than a lifeline for me. It was the joy and the energy that I needed to come back and then do more of the caretaking and do more of the work and the journey, and then go back and get my hit again. From it's like drugs to here. You're like
Yeah.
we're on a drug, right? But going back to the as a KPI, right? If we're talking to the people where they're like, okay, how do you measure it? They want that whole idea of show me the formula. How do we put this within our plan, our strategy? What are the metrics? Because they're all about numbers. What would you say to them?
So I think that there's lots of different kinds of numbers, clearly. So we did it quite a long time ago now. I worked on a large show that was called the BC Tech Summit. And with that show, it's like every other show, every exhibitor wants to know, like, how many leads am I going to scan? Like, how am I going to scan those business cards? And one of the metrics that we used on our post survey evaluations was to say, how many meetings did you have that will lead to a second meeting? We know how many badge scans you have. We have that data. And it was on average from 2 days, 15. So would you rather go to a show that's live and open and vibrant and have great conversations with people that will turn into great second conversations, or would you rather just scan a bunch of badges, send a bunch of emails, and hope for the best?
Yeah.
Like, that, to me, that's clear. That's a pretty obvious. You can't put that into your CRM as easily,
No.
but it's actually the most important thing. If you just spent all of your time post show focusing on those people, going out for coffee versus sending an email, you're going to turn those into business. That's why people go to live trade shows, which also, again, we've been going to live trade shows since the beginning of time. That's the open market was how we got everything.
Right.
So, we need to remember that this is the most human experience and humans do business together.
That's
So
absolutely.
that's one way of measuring it. Another way of measuring it is, working with, groups like Zenus and other groups that who are doing the facial recognition analysis. So it's anonymous. They're not recognizing your face. What they're recognizing on your face is level of engagement by, eye dwell, contact time, mouth up, mouth down. There's a whole variety of characteristics. And we had an interesting experience. So at IMAX, not with where we had Google the first year that they came, worked with Storycraft and they worked with their, set up their space. And in that space, they had at the back of it an Ikigai table, which is like an identity exercise that you go through. And they were working with Ben Morsom, who's written Engagement Decoded, amazing book that really talks about this. So he has a company in Canada, and they have had neuroscientists on their event staff for 27 years, since
Oh,
the
wow.
beginning, and they've been using AI and facial analysis seriously for the last 8 years. So they have tons of data. So when we looked at that first raw data, what came out of that was that engagement scores were lower if you were looking at the raw data. What was actually happening was people had just gone through an intense identity experience, something that they will remember and take away with them as part of their overall core memories from this event, and they came out looking thoughtful. So instead of joyful.
Nice.
And, so that's a metric that you also need to look at and consider what the experience was. We use that tracking at a lot of our sponsor activations at
Hmm.
IMEX, and we give that data back to the sponsors to see like when people came into the experience, how long did they stay? Did they come in, if they came in at sort of 75% engagement, did they leave at 85% engagement? So and in every case, you can see increased engagement, increased joy, increased when they come into a well-designed experience. So well-designed experiences work. Like we have a lot of metrics around it. They'll have a more positive memory of XYZ destination because of that small moment in time where they had a positive interaction.
Yeah.
We've seen at many events headshot lounges. The headshot lounges where people are smart about it are the ones where they put their smiling staff in that line and they talk to people the whole time. And it could
Exactly.
be somewhere, quite often those headshot lounges are sponsored by definitely not a first tier destination. They're often sponsored by a destination that you're way less familiar with. And what a
Yeah.
smart activation because you're giving people, they leave, also because I was a hairstylist before I was an event planner, there's a lot of data around how much better we feel on a good hair day
Yeah.
than a not good hair day. You know,
True.
and so sorry you have a ponytail in, but I'm gonna use my ponytail example. Anybody who's worked with me in a job for any amount of time has this perception that I hate ponytails. So they still won't wear ponytails if like we're meeting up somewhere, unless we're doing something active, then they can wear ponytails. And it's
Okay.
not that I hate ponytails. What I hate is when somebody shows up at their registration desk with their hair still damp and their hair's in a ponytail because you're not ready for work.
Yeah.
Or it's day 3 of a pretty intense event and you've got greasy hair pulled back in a ponytail because you didn't have the energy. That's our fault. Like, we need to make sure that people have enough energy to shower. So,
Definitely.
it's not the
But it's an
ponytail
indication. That's
itself.
a signal for you.
It's the effect that has led to the ponytail because as soon as you have a bad ponytail, you are not in a joyful space. You are in a, "Oh, this is gonna be a really long day" space. So, again, housework, gardening, like, I wear ponytails all the time, so
Well,
I have a lot of hair.
the funny
So
thing about ponytails and me, but this is not for you, like this is not meant today with you, is my kids always tell me when you have your ponytail up, it means you're in a very bad mood. And it's like it's it's kind of interesting because it gives that perception, but I like the signals that you're talking about, what do ponytails
But
say?
also, like,
So,
honestly, if someone's in food service and is bringing me food, I don't want all this hair. Like, I
yeah.
I wanna see those ponytails, like,
So in the book, how long did it take you to write the book?
forever. I started it in 2023, didn't write it for a long time, and then finished it kind of through, like, after IMEX last year and then into, sort of January of this year. And it was, it's always a process, right? So, you give it to someone to read. They're like, "Well, it's, you can do better." It's like, "I know, I can actually," and someone else read it and who's a very good writer and whose opinion I trust infinitely, and they're like, "It gets good around page 30." I was like, "Okay, like, that's good." So, you know what I did? I took page 30 and I moved it to page 2 because she was right. Like, it wasn't the beginning was like blah, 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 eventy,
Yeah,
eventy. It wasn't compelling. Now it's compelling. So,
that's great. What's your favorite chapter?
well, it's not really chapters
Okay,
per se, and it's not even intentions like the first one. It's a lot shorter. It's 130 pages. I can tell you that what I'm seeing now, so it went on sale on Friday. So, and from March 21st until next Monday, March 31st, $3 from every book sold is going to the Search Foundation. So we're doing really well, actually. It's really exciting. But people are already finished it. They're reading
that's
it on
awesome.
planes. They're like they've sat down and just, it's a pretty easy read. It's a lot of
Mhm.
stories. It's not too dense. Someone else whose opinion I really, really trust, who read it, said it's a little like, it's part story, part case study, and part event lessons. And I really like it, and sent me the most beautiful review. But it is all of those things. Like, it's not, here's how, so, in intentional event design, where my favorite thing is I see people with Post-its sticking out of it and pages bent over and it's well used. Like, that's my favorite because it's a very useful book.
Yeah.
This is a book that is much more personal, much more storytelling. And what I also love is, so last night I was driving home and I got a text that's just like, "Okay, these are the parts so far that made me say 'ah' out loud." So, that's what I love, and there's a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 9 things so far,
That's awesome.
and that's what I want. I want people to feel connected to the book in a way that makes you think. There's a lot of hard stories in it,
Mhm.
because that's life,
Totally.
So our KPI is joy, like, you can't have known joy if you haven't known sorrow. And because again, we're human,
Mhm.
we have to have all of that range of emotions. What we have to do with our events, especially a business event, if our organization is investing in something, they're investing in us going to an event, they're investing in building an event, which is millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, depends on the scale of the event. There has to be a return. And that return isn't going to come by making people miserable. And
That's very
giving
true.
them, a bad breakfast followed by 6 hours of super intense things with no breaks, followed by, "Oh, I need to go and put on another outfit to go and do more. May I please sit in a loud room at a loud dinner and not only be able to talk to the person
Yeah,
beside me?" And then they
exactly.
expect to get a return on that. That's not where you're gonna get the return from.
Definitely.
So we have to be planning our events. Our it's a business event book. This isn't, I give some examples of how we can create fan experiences from, the Savannah Bananas to the Lewis Football Club to Swifties, which of course that's going to make most people smile.
Mhm.
But we're gonna only do that when we create experiences that bring people a sense of connection, space for dialogue, space for hugs, space to connect the dots between what I've heard and learned and how I can apply it to my life, and
Exactly.
then to be able to leave wanting to do or be better.
Yeah.
and better is, I don't like the word better because what does better mean? It's incremental. But at the end of the day, if you are investing in sending people to something, they need to come back and be more productive. They need to be, you need to have built trust. You need to
But they
have,
have more value in themselves. Like they feel like
yes,
they harnessed some sort of power.
yes, 100%.
And
And
that
you can take it
power
back
is,
and own that
yeah.
experience
And
and
that
bring it
power is
forward.
infused with the positive, with the joy. And I totally agree. Well, I think you did an awesome job yet again, because your first book, which I see behind you,
They're
is,
all there.
I mean,
It
everybody has
just came
that
yesterday.
bookmarked with
It's
Post-it.
so
The
pretty. Look at
Post-it.
it.
It is pretty. Look at that. And it's shiny.
And it's shiny.
It's
Yeah.
shiny and pretty.
I love it.
And
So
it
this is
brings me joy.
do you
And
remember Eric Lukaszewski from the olden days of event camp? So it's who designed my book cover.
I love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, my dear. Well, this was fantastic. And
Thank you.
it's lovely that you brought this to the world, to us. And
Who knew
yeah,
the timing was going to be so good?
yeah. We need it. We need joy right now, like
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
So awesome. Good to hear.
Thank you.
That's all for today's Coffee with Dahlia. Huge thanks to Tahira Endean for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay curious and caffeinated. See you next time.